You know, our guest speaker, my good friend Rand Paul, came a long way to be here tonight, and I don't want to stand between you and him very much longer. I do want to say a couple of things, but I am glad Rand is here. I think at some point in the evening he's going to have to get back to Kelly and his family, and we are so glad he came. I went up to him on the Senate floor one day and said, we have this really big event, Rand, in Missouri that we would benefit if you would be part of it, and he said he would. You know, there is no single member of the Senate that I agree with on everything. That includes even Rand Paul. Now, even, my best friend, Abby Blunt, is here, and she and I don't agree on everything, but she's always right. I want to make that clear, and I understand that, and when we don't agree, it's totally my fault. But she's always right. But we don't agree on everything, but we've got to build our party in significant ways. I asked, Rand and I do a lot of things together. We came to the Senate the same day, the 3 years ago, and we have suffered through the terrible leadership of Harry Reid together. We've seen the power of the Senate be given away by the majority leader so that the President of the United States could get out his pen and his phone and do whatever he wanted to do. We fought back on that. I asked my staff the other day, I said, Rand's coming to Springfield. We do a lot of stuff together. Would you just check and see how many bills we've sponsored? We have been sponsors of the same bill. And I was surprised when the number came back. It was 136. 136 bills that Rand Paul and I have worked on together. And then there was a double handful of bills that he and I were the two principal sponsors of. Things that you're for, that he's for, that I'm for, that will make a difference. We have one bill where Congress would have to vote on every regulation that has any significant economic impact at all. And I'm ready to do that. Rand's ready to do that. We think that Congress should do that. We need to find out where the members are. There's something called the Congressional Review Act that's really hard to exercise, but both of us are encouraging our colleagues to bring these rules up, even though they're going to fail with the Senate we're in today. I'd like to know where every member of the Senate is on these rules that hold people back and create barriers to opportunity. So it's called the Reins Act, put a rein on government again. We co-sponsored 2 amendments to the immigration bill that neither of us voted for the bill, but we co-sponsored 2 amendments. One was to make it a crime to encourage people who can't legally vote to vote. And another was to verify that people who are coming into the country for the first time and becoming citizens truly are citizens before they vote. We had another bill that would audit the Fed. And why wouldn't we want to do that? So audit the Fed. And then we had a bill that I principally led on right after we got to the Congress. It was the first rash of rules and regulations from the Obama administration on health care. And it was the one that said that you have to offer, this is what your insurance policy has to look like, even if it violates your faith principles. And even if you're Notre Dame. In fact, if you're anybody except the church itself, the church, the synagogue, the mosque itself, inside the buildings of the church, if you're anybody, if you're a Catholic hospital, if you're a Jewish senior center, you have to do this no matter what your faith says about what you should do. And in the law itself, by the way, if you don't offer insurance at all, your penalty as an employer is $2,000 per employee per year. But if you don't offer the exact insurance that Kathleen Sebelius and Barack Obama think you should offer, even if it violates your faith principles, your penalty is $36,500 per employee per year. For Hobby Lobby, as an example, it's over $1 million a day. So in America, the government should never give you your choice. You either have to give up your business for your faith, or you have to give up your faith for your business. And this is as far beyond the president's ability to understand as anything you can imagine. It's just, why would you worry about it? And now the recent case, they have this wonderful case, the United States of America versus the Little Sisters of the Poor. They're not even taking on the big sisters of the poor. They're taking on the little sisters of the poor, and we have both filed and joined in briefs to the court as to why we think both of those cases, the individual who owns a business who wants to follow their faith principles, are clearly the religious group that runs an organization that wants to follow their faith principles should be able to do that. You know, the first of all the freedoms in the Constitution is the freedom of religion. And so we find things to work together, but there are a lot of things certainly that Rand is a great leader on. He's a doctor at a time when health care is headed in a dramatically bad direction. He has been interested in foreign policy for issues for years. He gave up his medical practice to come to Washington to make a difference, and he's doing that. There was a pretty amazing effort led by Rand last year where for 13 hours on the floor, he was just staying on the floor until the Attorney General of the United States was willing to sign a letter, as it finally turned out, that we actually wouldn't attack Americans in America with drones. Now that doesn't sound like a big ask, but it took 13 hours. It took 13 hours. We don't have 13 hours of his time tonight, but we have some of his time. We are grateful to have it. I think Rand Paul is the Senate's leading advocate for freedom, and we're lucky to have him with us here tonight. Senator Rand Paul. You're up.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Blunt. And as many of you know, I am very interested in civil liberties, but as Senator Blunt said, primary among the civil liberties is obviously your religious liberty. And there has been no greater leader in the Senate than Senator Blunt on defending your religious liberties. The Hobby Lobby case is a perfect example. The government should not force you to give up your faith to remain in business, and you should thank Senator Blunt for his leadership. So there was a little girl, and she wanted $100, and she said, well, I'll just send a letter to God. Dear God, I'd like $100. I'll do good things with it. So she sent the letter, but the postmaster didn't know what to do with it. So the postmaster got it and said, well, that's cute. What do we do with it? He said, I'll send it to the president. So the president gets the letter, and he's like, well, that's kind of cute. Let's send the girl $5. She'll think that's a lot of money. So the girl gets the $5. She's a little bit underwhelmed. But her parents said, always write a thank you, so she wrote a thank you. She said, Dear God, thanks for the money, but next time don't send it through Washington. They stole 95% of it. I come from Washington to help you. I come from Washington with news. I've got good news and bad news. Good news is your government's open. Bad news is your government's open, okay? Open and still borrowing over $1 million every minute. So we didn't fix anything. We just keep spending it, but nothing has been fixed. So your government's open, but spending $1 million or borrowing $1 million every minute. But during the shutdown, you remember the shutdown. Oh, that's right. Some people didn't notice it was a shutdown, so the president had to go wrap the World War II monument. Okay? So he was afraid you might not know your government was shut down, so he sent 100 government workers out there to close a monument that was paid for with private money and has no entrance or exit, and nobody works at the World War II monument. I think its upkeep is actually through a private foundation. But they're afraid you wouldn't know your government was shut down, so he wrapped it with barricades. And then they decided they were going to arrest the World War II veterans that were up there. That didn't go over so big. But when you think about the shutdown and you think, what is the image I should remember about this dastardly thing? Remember the image of the World War II vets going out there with wire cutters, cutting the barricades, piling them on their bus, and dumping them on the lawn at the White House. As Roy said, he and I were sworn in the same day, and I'm new up there, and so I'm learning about government. So when the shutdown happened, they sent me a note, and they said, you can determine who's essential and who's unessential. So, well, this is fascinating. We're really going to get to the heart of what we should be doing up here and what we shouldn't be doing up here. And then I looked at the different agencies. EPA, they turned their list in, 95% unessential. It's like there's a lesson here, guys, 95% unessential. But here's the interesting thing. They're going through the EPA list, 95% unessential, and they come across a guy named Jonathan Beale. He'd worked there for 11 years. He was an important guy. In fact, every one of his performance reviews for work, he'd gotten raises for 11 years. But it turns out when they were looking for him to try to let him know if he was essential or unessential, nobody could find him. So they went to his boss and they said, "Where is he? We looked at the enrollment records and the attendance rate hadn't been here for 6 months." And they said, he's a CIA agent. And they were like, "Really? He works at the EPA and he's a CIA agent?" They said, "Yeah, that's what he told us." And they said, "Well, did anybody ever check?" So they called the CIA, and apparently he's not a CIA agent, but he's been taking 6 months a year off for the last 11 years. So here's the way I imagine Jonathan Beale. Laying by the pool in his chaise lounge with a beer, his boss calls and says, "Are you coming in?" Jonathan, "No, I'm in Istanbul. I'm on a secret assignment in Istanbul. Can't come in. Won't be in for a few more weeks." He apparently was running up great tabs at their expense. But here's the real kicker. You know what his expertise was? You know what he was in charge of? Global warming. So you think there would have been a lesson over this. There wasn't much lesson learned. We just go blithely on our way. In 2011, we had a big battle over the debt ceiling, and we got something that was called the sequester. And the sequester was a slowdown in the rate of growth of government. It were caps that were placed on spending. But government doesn't really have a flat baseline. You would imagine that would make sense, but they don't. The baseline in government goes up like this. So we got the sequester, and the sequester changed spending from here to here. In fact, the chart was all over Fox News, but as you saw, there was almost no white space between what we were spending and what we were spending under the sequester. It was a slowdown in the rate of growth of spending over 10 years. Everybody complained. Democrats complained, Republicans complained. We finally even got rid of it just recently. It's kind of disappointing to me. But during the sequester, the president said, "We could never cut any spending. It'll be a disaster," he said. He said, "We will have to lay off the air traffic controllers." And it's like, really? You're the president of the United States and the first people you're going to lay off are the air traffic controllers? People thought it was just the dumbest thing we had ever heard, and it kind of quickly got pushed along the wayside. His next genius idea for saving money was, let's fire all the meat inspectors. The meat will be rancid. That'll teach you that we shouldn't cut spending. And of course, Senator Blunt got involved in this because apparently a lot of the meat is apparently inspected here, and it would have shut the whole government down, and it was a stupid, stupid idea. But why? Because they're afraid you won't notice if the government shut down. Why wouldn't you notice if the government shut down? Because the government really wasn't shut down. 2/3 of your government is on autopilot. Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid are 2/3 of your government. We don't even vote on them. And therefore, we're not reforming them. 2/3 of your government goes on and on and on. And these are things we may want, but they are not paying for themselves, and nobody's doing anything about them. So 2/3 of your government remained open. That leaves 1/3. Half of the third is the military. And that's the primary thing our federal government's there for. We should have a national defense. So we voted, and even the Democrats voted with us. We opened up the military. So now during the shutdown, we're down to a half of 1/3. We're down to about 1/6 of the government. About 15% of government was closed. And so what did we offer? We offered to open it back up if they would just delay the individual mandate on Obamacare. Well, of course, we started with repeal, which was a better notion, but it wasn't going to fly. But then we backed off to let's tell them that we'll delay the individual mandate. Absolutely not. The president says he won't negotiate with a gun to his head. What did he do 3 weeks after the government opened up? Delay the individual mandate. So the guy's not serious, nor is he acting constitutionally. But the thing is everybody pulls their hair out and says we can't cut any spending. But if you want to look at areas to cut some spending, Senator Tom Coburn does a great job, something called a waste book. It's item after item after item. And if you don't want to look at the individual items, look at the big ticket items. There's $100 billion unaccounted for. They spent it. They just have no idea where they spent it. It's not accounted for. $100 billion every year unaccounted for. I will jokingly say we've got bipartisan support, though, for no longer sending out pension checks or welfare checks to dead people. However, I would be remiss in saying that it actually has been working very well. In the last 5 years, we passed out over $500 million to dead people. One guy got caught. He'd been collecting his dad's check from 1971 until 2008. You know how they caught him? He died. So your government's Johnny on the spot. They'll catch you if you die and you're still collecting. But here, to make matters worse, some of us are very concerned that a government would abuse its power and attack you personally or your business. We talked to one gentleman tonight who had OSHA come after him after he made a contribution to the Republican Party. We're worried about stuff like that. And so we think, well, gosh, surely government wouldn't target people, wouldn't target individuals. But then we see what they did to Tea Party groups, what the IRS did. And as we go through this, we're concerned. And there was a woman who was running a Tea Party group. That's loosely defined, just means anybody that's conservative. Her group was, their purpose or their goal was to try to get dead people off. Somebody's messing with my microphone. To get dead people off the voting rolls. I think they should have given her a medal. You know what they gave her? Personal audit by the IRS, business audit by the IRS, the ATF showed up. The FBI interviewed her 17 times. Her name's Catherine Engelbright, and she was wanting to restore the vote to get dead people off the rolls. So we're sort of a long way away from trying to fix the system. I think the people are ready, but when you go to Washington, the legislature is at least a decade behind. We're not there yet, so we need more voices. We need you calling, writing. We need more pressure on Washington to try to do the right thing. I've sent the president some letters. I haven't been getting any response. If you talk to the president, tell him he needs to send me an answer. I gave him some suggestions for where we cut things. First, let's find where the $100 billion is that's unaccounted for. Second, I said, why don't we just not rehire federal workers that retire? That's $6 billion a year. Do you remember when he debated Romney and the president said, oh, there'll be no sequester, so he didn't do a damn thing. So he went a year and a half after the sequester was passed and he didn't do anything. If he'd simply not rehired people who had retired, he would have saved $9 billion in a year and a half. We sent him another suggestion. We said, why don't we have competitive bidding? And you may scratch your head and say, well, certainly they take the lowest bid. Well, they kind of do and they kind of don't. They take the lowest bid, but when you bid on a federal project, it has to be prevailing wage, which may be a union wage in Chicago that has nothing to do with a carpenter or electrician's wage in Springfield. So we end up paying 20, 30% extra on these federal projects. There's all kinds of ways you could save. But he wasn't listening. So I decided maybe we'd shame him with a few things. We spent $500,000 last year developing a menu for Mars. This is a great job. If you've got a 26-year-old kid living in your basement and you want to get him a job, $5,000 stipend, 2 weeks in Hawaii, all expenses paid. It's very difficult to get, though. The prerequisite for getting this, you have to like food. Okay? So what did a bunch of college kids come up with who were sent to Hawaii for 2 weeks to think of what kind of food we should have on Mars? Pizza. In the NASA budget, we spent $125,000 developing a 3D printer to make pizza. Now, I wonder if the next thing they'll study is how to get the 3D printer sent to Mars. We spent $3 million to put a shrimp on a treadmill. And the question was, if a shrimp is sick and not so healthy, will they be less likely to exercise on the treadmill? I think it's secretly part of Michelle Obama's Let's Move campaign, is what I think. Part of the reason what happens with government is it runs amok. Well-intentioned things just kind of go overboard. Should there be some permits and some rules and regulation? Yeah, we can probably tolerate it. Anybody remember the John and Judy Dollarite family? They're from Nixa, Missouri. They wanted to teach their 14-year-old kid about having a small business. They gave him some rabbits, and you know when rabbits get together, you get more rabbits. So all of a sudden he had a business, and they were thriving pretty well. And they go to church with somebody from the USDA, so they ask him, what kind of permit do we need? And he said, the permit you got's fine. They get an audit, or they get a surprise visit. Apparently it's a surprise visit from the USDA, and you know they're armed. They have a SWAT team. Why does the USDA have a SWAT team? So they show up at the farm, and they say, we've got the wrong permit. And they say, well, we asked the local office, and they told us the right permit. They said it'll be a $90,000 fine. But they said, we're the government, and we're very open to helping you pay. We take credit cards. But if you don't pay within 30 days, your bill will be $3.1 million. This went on for 2 years. So ridiculous that finally the USDA backed down. But you know, to add insult to injury, you know what they did in the very end? This is a farming family. I don't know how big Nick's is. I'm guessing it's a small farming community. They sent them a letter in the very end saying, we will not fine you the $3 million, but you have to make a promise never to have anything to do with farm animals again. What kind of insult to have your government so meddlesome, so abusive, and then to tell a farming family they can't be involved with animals? The bunny stories can go on. I'll give you another bunny story. Marty the magician has one bunny, okay? He does children's shows, and he goes from school to school. He has one bunny. He got a letter in the mail and said he has to have an evacuation plan in times of natural disaster for his bunny. If he does not have this, it'll be a $25,000 fine. He has to carry this with him everywhere he goes with the bunny. And he got kind of annoyed. So the USDA regulator was in his face, and he said, I have to have a permit, an evacuation plan. I'm subject to surprise visits at my birthday parties. But if I hold this bunny up in front of the kids and shoot it and eat it in front of them, I don't need a permit? Yes, that's correct. For meat, you don't need this permit. You don't have to have a disaster plan if you're going to eat the bunnies. We have gone just crazy with stuff. And some of it's well-intentioned. The Clean Water Act says you can't discharge pollutants into the river. I agree with that. I'll bet you most Republicans do. You should not have a chemical company and dump chemicals in the Mississippi River. You should be prevented, you should be fined, and you should have to pay a penalty if it happens accidentally. However, a well-intentioned regulation like that morphed into, we now define dirt as a pollutant, and we define your backyard as a navigable water. Things just went crazy. We went overboard on these things. I'll finish here pretty quickly because I could go on and on. I have 13 hours, right, Roy? I'll give you one more story. This is a Clean Water Act. We developed the wetlands policy out of the Clean Water Act. So Ken Lucas is in the southern part of Mississippi, maybe the panhandle of Florida. He puts clean dirt on his own land to raise the elevation so they can build some houses on it, so it'll be of more value. His daughter's a part-time nurse and sells some lots for him part-time. They convict him of the RICO statute, which is what they use for drugs. It's for conspiracy. They convict him of conspiracy to violate the Clean Water Act. Okay, he's not dumping benzene in the Everglades. He put clean dirt on his own land. He got 10 years in prison. He's 70 years old. His engineer's 80 years old. They got 10 years in prison. He got 10 years in prison. The daughter is a Girl Scout leader, has a 2-year-old girl at home, has never had a speeding ticket. She got 84 months in prison. Your government is out of control, literally out of control. We've got to get it back. The way we get it back, though, is by having a bigger party, okay? We need a bigger party. We need a party that looks like America. We need a more diverse party. I tell people it's got to have people with tattoos and without tattoos, with earrings and without earrings. Ponytails, I saw somebody here with a ponytail, a guy with a ponytail. That's okay. We're going to look like the rest of America, but it also means black, white, brown. We need to be a more accepting party. It's easy to say we're going to be that. It's a lot harder to actually be that. I'll give you 3 quick items of things we need to do and talk about if we want more people in our party. School choice. Democrats, it's a disaster what they've done to kids on education. We can get people in our party with that. Economic freedom zones. Senator McConnell and I have introduced this. This is any area with high unemployment, we just dramatically lower the taxes. So the Democrats come to a poor area, maybe in St. Louis, Kansas City, maybe Chicago, and they say, here's a grant. But they give it to the wrong people most of the time because nobody knows who will be the good business person. The marketplace has to decide that. So I would say, let's don't give grants, let's give tax reductions, but huge tax reductions. The plan we have would leave $1 billion in Detroit. Wouldn't take it from you in Springfield. It would just lower the taxes dramatically in poor areas to try to get them on their feet again. It's a way for us to be for something that helps to alleviate poverty and say, look, Democrats, you've been trying this for 40 years. The grants aren't working. After-school basketball is not getting people into the middle class. So there are ways that we could help and be for alleviating poverty. And then the final thing I'll say may or may not divide some of us, but I think we should think about it. The war on drugs has had a disproportionate effect on people of color. 3 out of 4 people in prison for nonviolent drug crimes are African American or Hispanic. But if you look at surveys, some of your kids and grandkids have made this mistake also. They either had a better lawyer or the police didn't come to your neighborhood. I'm just telling you like it is, and I tell you they see it this way. And what I'm saying is, I'm not for legalizing any of this stuff. What I'm saying is, let's try to make sure it's fair. Let's try to make sure people get counseling and not 10 years in jail. Weldon Angelos got 55 years in prison for marijuana sales. You can kill somebody in my state and be eligible for parole in 12 years. All right? We've gone overboard on some of this stuff, and it has had a disproportionate effect. So if we talk about school choice, economic freedom zones in areas of poverty, and also talk about trying to make our drug laws more fair to everybody, I think we've got a chance to really grow our base of who we attract in our party. I think we need to do it with optimism. We need to do it, and we need to proclaim our message such that it brings new people in. Robert Henry was a painter of the turn of the last century, and I like the way he put it. He said to young painters, he said, paint like a man coming over the hill singing. I think if we proclaim our message with the passion of Patrick Henry, but also like a man coming over the hill singing, I think we'll be the dominant party again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Paul. Thank you.